Well, hello, everybody. Um, Welcome to Northampton Neighbors Speaker Series. My name is Ann Bauer. I am a member of the Speakers Committee. We are delighted to have you with us here today. I think we have a very fun and engaging and interactive topic today. Let me just tell you a little bit about Northampton Neighbors. For those of you who may be new to us, we are a nonprofit organization based in Northampton, but we are part of an international movement of villages. Our mission is to assist people to be able to stay and engage in place and home. Our members are 55 and up. And we're up to about 1,300 members. We're about 5 years old as an organization at this point. There's lots of wonderful activities for Northampton neighbors and all kinds of things you would be interested perhaps in. And at the end of our presentation, it will give you information about how to contact Northampton neighbors to become a member or possibly volunteer or to receive volunteer services. Okay, I think that's about it. Let me move on to our main attraction here. Today, our speaker is Robert Jonas, a doctor of education, and he happens to be a neighbor of mine. I'm very proud of that. And he's an aging neighbor and a good man, he tells me. He didn't want me to go into a big, long explanation, but Jonas has many things to his credit. One of the wonderful things he's done for our neighborhood up here in Village Hill is he conducts the Empty Bell, which is a meditation center, and invites many of us to partake in that on a regular basis. He also has recently published his fourth book, which is called My Dear Far Nearness, and you can get a copy of that on, I guess it's the Orbis Press. So without further ado, like I said, Dr. Jonas, excuse me, is going to be talking about 25 minutes, and then we'll proceed with some questions. I hope I addressed everything. Thank you. Jonas, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Ann. And maybe you can, if I get too involved in speaking, too carried away, you can give me some sign that it's time, like this, something like
One of
that.
those. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Okay. I have to say it's real thrill to be here because sometimes, I'm 75 years old, and sometimes as I age, moment to moment, I get lonely, and then I call a friend or meet with friends, and it's one of the reasons I lead contemplative groups, which I've done for 30 years, because I love being with people, talking about what's actually going on in our lives, and I would like to begin. This is such a huge topic. I don't know where to start. I'd like to begin with a kind of an overview of our culture and aging and how it's usually understood. I began by saying I'm 75 years old, and one thing some of you know is that sometimes it's embarrassing for us as we get older to tell people how old we are, and that's the reason. That's one reason I put it right out there at the beginning, because I'd rather be 40 again, But I'm saying I'd rather be real than 40, actually. So I also, you probably understand that in this culture, we are trained, whether it's conscious or unconscious, we're trained to be loners in a way, individuals. We need to go out and get our own jobs and survive. And the question of who am I very rarely comes up because we identify with our jobs. And but actually we are part of a cohort of people who are of similar age. And I want to show you an image of what that might look like historically. So if you look down in the bottom, you'll see years that are listed from 1880 to 2030. My guess is we don't have anybody today from 1880 who was born in 1880. Let me know if that's incorrect. Um, so see if you can find yourself on that timeline in the bottom. Our country, the United States, is aging along from left to right. And no matter wherever you find yourself on this diagram, you're in a way having a different experience of aging than people who came before you or people who come after you. We're part of a cultural cohort, a cultural generation. Um, and I like this design because it brings in phrases that I've heard over the years but haven't quite understood. How there was a lost generation, which included people who experienced the First World War, for example. The greatest generation, World War II, the silent generation, the baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, Generation Y, boomers, Generation Z, and most recently, Generation Alpha, which I hadn't heard until I found this particular design. Now, for somebody, as you look down in the toward the bottom, you see World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, Cold War, the War on Terror, and then we could add more recent events like the pandemic, for example, and other experiences that we've all gone through together. Some of us more or less enlightened by these experiences or wounded by these experiences. So there's a we in here when we're talking about aging. How am I experiencing aging? There's a we in there. That how are we experiencing aging? That's why at being a baby boomer, I really enjoy being with folks who are that generation, because we've experienced the Cold War together, we've experienced Vietnam together, et cetera. And there are certain things that we have experienced. Let's leave the image for the time being. If folks want this image, we could send it out maybe later. So there's that larger view of aging in this culture and what we've experienced together. And I can find places on that timeline where I and my family were very wounded, and we've experienced traumatic experiences somewhere on that timeline. I had relatives that were in the First World War. My grandfather was in the First World War. His buddy was shot in the head by the Germans, and my grandfather was German, and he was a translator for the U.S. Army in World War I, and he experienced singing Christmas in English, Christmas carols in English and German across the trenches. And interviewing him on video helped me understand what it's like to go through a war and to be considered an alien because he spoke German in America that was fighting Germans. So I joined Ancestor.com some years ago and did the DNA test. And I've just been thrilled to find second, third cousins all over the country. And I think I have to say, this has helped my aging process, that I'm part of something larger than myself. More recently, we've all experienced things like the extreme political polarization in our country and the hatred and the othering of people who are different. Racism, we've become more conscious of racism. I've been involved in the land back movement for Native Americans. The increasing realization as I get older of how we treated Native Americans, the incredible trauma, abuse that we inflicted on the people who lived here. And so in my work with land trusts, and also in other ways, in music, I play music sometimes with Native Americans. I'm trying to forget who I am as a white male, in a sense. I honor who I am, of course, but I realize that um, white males have inflicted huge damage across the world, really. So how to hold that guilt? There's another feeling that can come up, as we age: shame and guilt, trauma. How do we face these things? And I want to get to some tips about how to experience these things in a way that can still enliven our lives and make it possible for us to be happy as we age and to be good elders, and to maybe even experience wisdom, even though these terrible things are happening. We've all experienced technological changes. I've had computer breakdowns recently, and I subscribe to things on Adobe for filmmaking, for example, and about twice a week there are updates, and I get really like I can't keep up with the changes that are happening technologically, even though they've been incredible gifts to me. We were just talking with Nina and Anne about, I have a YouTube channel. I have about 110 short videos that I've made of social action events, musical events, cultural change events, spiritual events. And so that's really enlivened my aging process, along with music and again, the land trust work that I'm doing with others. So maybe I'll pause there. I wanted to take the big view first and say a few things personally that you can maybe identify with or not. And I want to hear what's happening for you and what your questions are. So I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I would open up the space here with more personal questions that can come up as we age. I was just meeting with a couple people from the Conway School of Landscape Design about their current projects, and it was wonderful work with younger people. And as the 3 or 4 of us sat talking, we were trying to remember somebody's name, and of course we all just broke out in laughter. Like, remembering names, like, do you remember when you used to be able to do that? It's a real challenge, and being treated differently because we're aging, by younger people, even sometimes by people who are as old as we are. Do we still want to be attractive? Am I attractive now? Well, like I used to be, probably, maybe, I don't know. But it's a question that can come up. Wondering, have I done enough to help others? Feeling some guilt maybe about that. Did I make the right choice about the professional jobs that I took? I find it difficult to write by hand anymore, because I type everything, and all these books I've written have been on either a typewriter or on a laptop, and just little things like that that begin to show up, like giving me a clue that I'm older. Things are slower. I need a nap just about every day. I eat differently. I'm more careful about eating. I'm really careful about walking downstairs. I have a friend who was 75 years old, my age, turns out, and she was lying in bed with her husband one night and noticed that the light was on downstairs. She asked her husband to go down and turn out the light. And they love each other. It's a beautiful story. But what happened is that he tripped on the stairs going down, and he broke his neck and he died. And one conversation I have had with this woman is how she's been able to recover from the guilt and the trauma of that event. And I've experienced what I would call wisdom in somebody who can go through something like that and still be someone I experience as a good person and a happy person and even a wise person. Trauma doesn't have to stop us from aging into elderhood and wisdom. Then, of course, there's the question of death. We're mortal, and it doesn't matter what cohort we're in, whether we're Generation X or the Great Generation or even Alpha. We all are going to die, and we started dying as soon as we were born. I remember once when I was struggling with the realization that I was going to die, that I went to a retreat by a psychologist when I was living in Cambridge, and Peggy Huddleston, maybe some of you know her, wonderful person. She had us lie down on a church floor and just take some deep breaths and imagine that we're dying. And then as we're breathing and just relaxing, noticing whatever's coming up about death, to imagine who's there, who's with us as we die. And what is that experience like? Noticing the fear that comes up, the anxiety, the love, whatever it is. And I think what I found over the years in aging is that allowing myself to have the inner space in my awareness to be aware of all the feelings that are arising moment to moment. If we go in the course of a day, we can go through multiple feelings and moods in the course of a day. And it can be subtle sometimes. I can notice, for example, especially as I age and because I've retreated from full-time work, I have a little more space to notice what's actually happening in me, a little more space to create moments of silence, and to realize. Yesterday I was realizing that I had I can't remember what it was, some pain in my body, which I have several, and it was causing me to have negative thoughts that had nothing to do with the pain. But I realized that the pain was bringing up negative thoughts, like feeling of guilt, or I'll never do enough, never be enough, whatever. All these places, negative places we can get entrapped in. So slowing down has helped me notice the subtlety of navigating the emotional life during the day. And I've been very helped in the subtlety of moment-to-moment experience by learning, experiencing Buddhist meditation of various kinds, Vipassana Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, Korean, Japanese, Tibetan Buddhism. Over the years, I've done a lot of silent retreats and really trained my mind, or my mind has been trained to be careful moment to moment and to notice what's actually happening. One of the things I notice in this moment-to-moment awareness is that Margaret and I have been married for 40 years and really love each other. And our love is, I would say, become even more beautiful and fruitful over the years. And one of the things I've noticed is that I'm appreciating more and more as I age how she's different from me. I think when we fell in love when we were young, there were so many common things. Our first date, we were talking about God and death and Freud, and obviously we were very much in our heads because we were both at Harvard at the time, and Harvard can do that. Just bring all your energy up into your head. But we really loved each other right away. But I had the fantasy that we were so alike. And over the years, that caused some problems between us because, of course, she would protest that she likes to do things differently than me. And then I would get irritated. But what's been happening lately, and she get irritated with me, is appreciating how she's different from me and loving the difference. And I think that little example is actually something greater than marital relationships or partnerships, intimate partnerships, because our country right now, is involved in othering that is of a negative sort. So when we notice that we're different from someone, um, we we judge them, we withdraw from them, we hang on the differences, and it's causing tremendous problems in our culture, about othering in the negative sense. Um, I've been appreciating, the uh, the experience that's called, this is out of European, philosophy, is called alterity. Alterity is some of you may know, it's a word to name positive othering. That is, to notice that we're different from someone and to value that difference, and it leads us into a desire to learn more about the other. And learning more about the other who's different turns out to help us learn more about ourselves, when we do that. So it's mutually beneficial. And so if you ever want to, learn more about that, alterity is, you can Google it, I guess. Um, I want to, say a few more things about how we can personally meet the challenges of aging, and some of the things that I've noticed. Maybe I'll do this instead. Almost, I I'm thinking about courage. That I get afraid. I get afraid to live. I can notice moments where I'm terrified. Um, I lead a lot of retreats and, around the country, mostly on Zoom now, which are psychological or spiritual retreats. They're in the Buddhist tradition or the Jewish or the Christian. I'm kind of I'm looking for wisdom wherever I can find it. So I'm basically a Christian. I have been all my life, but when I'm in Buddhist circles, I'm a Buddhist, and when I'm with Sufis, I'm dancing with Sufis, and I don't care about those kind of boundaries. I'm too old for that, making judgments about others. So I just want to know who's most alive, who's interested in being, creative together. My best friendships, friendships have changed as I've aged, so that now I choose people to be with, who I can be creative with, where we don't know what the agenda is. I love being in situations where I don't know what the agenda is, because I want to discover something new. I want to be new, even though I'm aging. I'm not going to give up like that. So I want to keep going toward the boundary of newness. And meditation and prayer have helped me, greatly. Music has helped me. Um, and here's how it works. Because let's see, it's 3:28. So Anne, maybe another 5 minutes or so. Is that okay? Um, I'd like, if we could, if you're willing, to just do a little experiment in case some of you haven't experienced, mindfulness or meditation or centering prayer, any of these practices. See if you can, bring awareness just for a minute or two to your breathing, and just settling the attention, inwardly down into the body and breathing. And notice what a wonderful experience this is, that the breath just comes. We don't have to decide to breathe. It's as if it's a gift, because actually it is. It's a gift that comes from nowhere. Breathing in and breathing out. And we may notice that at the top of the breath, as I breathe in, there's a little pause. And then I breathe out. And while I'm here in silence, and usually I close my eyes, but it's not necessary. Usually we're attracted to what's outside of us if our eyes are open. If we close our eyes, we can notice more clearly, accurately, what's happening inwardly. Might notice, body sensations, Might notice a pain in the butt or the legs from sitting. Might notice back pain or neck being uncomfortable. And relax into if there's stress there in the body, relax into it. Just relax. We tend to get tight around pain. So I found it really valuable to not be afraid of pain, to say, in a sense, well, you're my pain. I love you. Oh, well, or I hate you, but still, there's the experience of being friendly to our own pain. It's nobody else's. And maybe the experience of love or fear or shame. I had a conversation with somebody today, and I can still feel the shame that came up in me afterwards because I thought, oh, I shouldn't have said that. But I've learned to just relax into it. It's one of these waves of feeling that pass through. It's just passing through. So I try not to create a narrative around it, like, as I mentioned before, oh, I'm a bad person, or, I'm not a good conversationalist, or whatever it is. Just let it go. It's just being a human being. So I'm breathing into being a human being, not just myself, in a sense. That being a human being is really tough sometimes. Beautiful sometimes, joyful even sometimes, and sometimes just tough. So can I relax into this experience? In the last just a last minute of breathing in silence, noticing the top of the breath and the breath leaving, can experience gratitude. Thank you for this breath. And the you doesn't have to have a particular image. Sometimes I just say thank you and nobody's there. But it is a relationship somehow. The I and the you, I thank you. And the love. One of my Tibetan teachers, Choyam Trungpa, said, we might notice when we're hanging on that the bad news is that we're falling. But the good news is that there's no bottom. And what that means to me is that we can have the experience of trust even as we age and everything is passing and changing, that there's some way in which this invisible bottom that's holding us up is trustworthy. Now, I use the word love for that invisible bottom, or compassion, mercy. But you might have your own word for what that is, what's holding you up, ultimately what's holding you up. So as we come back together as a group, I'm just inclined to send my blessings to you. And just being in that quiet space with others opens my heart. So thank you. So I'm open to whatever we want to do next. Any comments? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jonas. That was lovely. Having those few moments was such a treat, I must say. Especially on Zoom. I'm always amazed we can do that on Zoom. But so I would invite anybody, as people are coming back to the group, to please type in questions. Jonas is really has a wealth of information about meditation and other areas of spirituality. I actually think it's pretty interesting that, you think about, or you talked about meditation, being a spiritual and emotional resource. I think you talked a lot about the emotions. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the spiritual resource and why might that be so important as we age?
Yes, thank you. So I was born in 1947, post World War II baby, and my grandparents spoke German around the house. When my parents became alcoholic, my parents and my grandparents took us in, me and two siblings. I have an image in a photograph of my grandmother, Leona Redens was her name. She's holding me in the window on the back porch, and I'm I was told I was close to death with bronchitis and pneumonia. She's holding me. I'm 2 years old. And I refer to that image occasionally, that in my most vulnerable moments of life and birth and death, that I'm being held by someone, by grandma, mother, especially. So the image of the, um, well, I don't know how to say this. This is both a psychological and a spiritual experience, right? Because my training in psychotherapy was in what's called object relations. Always thought it should be called subject relations. It's the idea that our self is formed in relationship. Our earliest relationships are really important. When we're vulnerable, we're helpless. Are we held or not? Are we abandoned? Is there trauma? Is there abuse? That these things are incredibly important. So when grandma holds me and I have that image, it feels ultimate to me, as if it a transcendent experience. Like I can let go into life itself because she is there for me. And in my spiritual life, when I'm in Christian or Sufi, Jewish, Tibetan, Buddhist environments, in many of them, there's an image of Divine Mother. I was talking to a fellow yesterday who grew up in Poland, and he's actually an Episcopal priest. This is very funny because he has dreadlocks. He's an Episcopal priest with a Polish accent and dreadlocks, and he and I are becoming friends. And it's another new experience for me, that where he says that in Poland, there's people are attracted to the worship of the Black Madonna, and I was really struck by that because it's also the Madonna experience is very important for friends of mine from Mexico who are Roman Catholic, but these images that are both psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually important exist all over the world in all the traditions with different names, different images. And as I've said earlier, that's where I want to go. I want to go to something that's universal, that transcends birth and life and death. And it's freely available. So I don't know if that answers your question yet. I'm just using an example of psycho-spiritual practices that have helped me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have another question, Jonas, that says that you mentioned elders in your write-up. What are elders? Here, they're going to get you into hot soup right now, I can tell. How are they different from old people? And how are they different from younger people?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. Honestly, I haven't thought this through, and I haven't written about it, so I'm just going to say what's on top of my mind. I think elders are have access to wisdom. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is the ability of a person, especially let's use the word elder, who knows how to listen. Elders know how to listen. And this is a rare resource in this culture because we're all talking so much. Um, we're all talking so much, and we're listening to other people talking. Social media, the TV, newspapers, a lot of words are constantly passing through. And we can get caught up in these words and these narratives and try to find our place in them. There's no space. I sometimes feel there's no space in all these words for me. So I just want to drop down into this wisdom place, where there's a listening happening in me that transcends my personal listening. I'm not just listening for myself, what can benefit me, what's going to help me. I'm listening for something more than that. And when I bring that listening to younger people and listen to them, sometimes I find they're quite astonished that somebody's listening, because we long to be heard. One professor that I know from Fordham University, I think he was Jesuit, I'm trying to remember his name, said that the key thing that many of us listen for is this voice that says, I see you, I know you, and I love you. And that many of us really long for that voice, and we haven't heard it. We've been rejected, we've been abused, we've been abandoned. We haven't heard that voice of someone who is really there for us. And this, again, is a psychological and a spiritual experience. There's no boundary between these two kinds of realities for me. Did I answer your question? I don't know where I went with that.
Well, it was elders. The question was really,
Yeah.
how are they different from old people? I think you got to that. It sounds like you're using the term elderhood as in a way to denote somebody who is cultivating wisdom, or
Yes.
thinking of and knowing, has knowledge of self. Am I getting that? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's very good. Yes, I agree with you. And also the listening, that it's someone who's learned to listen and not always project their own needs and self-concerns onto other people.
And then the end of the question was also, how are they different from younger people? Is it possible for younger people, I guess, to have some of these qualities as well?
Yeah, it's harder for younger people because they're trying to make a life for themselves, trying to survive. What's my job? I have a son who's 32, and is this the one for him? He's with a new lady friend. And he did 63 online dates when he was living in Chicago, 63 online dates to try to find who is the one, and then deciding on his vocation for the rest of his life. There's so many concerns that younger people have, but at the same time, I have to say that when I was young, I did have a sense that there's another reality within this reality, that there is a transcendent reality. And no one ever that I know of really understood that. So I've had to do a lot of searching throughout my life. Uh, I went to Dartmouth College from Wisconsin in 1967 by mistake, and I was a Lutheran, conservative Lutheran from Wisconsin. Well, I walked by chance at Dartmouth. I walked into a Taekwondo karate class, and all these guys are wearing. This was all men at the time. They're all wearing their gis, these white uniforms, and then they're sitting in silence. And I was astounded. Like, what is this? Just sitting in silence on a cushion. What the hell? And I thought spiritually, they were talking Buddhist language, and I thought spiritually in Wisconsin, if you just sit there and do nothing, you're just wasting your time, and you're just lazy. So you always got to be doing something. And that's what I grew up with. I always got to be accomplishing something, creating something, doing something. Not doing was a sin, actually, not doing anything. And then, but in this class at Dartmouth, I learned that just doing nothing was a way to survive a really highly competitive Ivy League environment. The teacher said, in the winter in Hanover, said, I want you to go outside in bare feet in the snow in Hanover, and I want you to warm your feet with chi. It's just send your body down there and warm your feet. And I thought, but then that was the beginning of my interfaith interest. I thought, wow, I wonder if Jesus knew about chi. Why not? But I mean, he was never in snow, but maybe he cooled his feet in the sands of the Middle East, you know? So, yeah. So, yes. So that was my introduction to silence and the beauty of silence and the goodness of silence. Yeah.
Well, we have a very interesting question here for you. I hope I will do it
Okay.
justice. From Anthony, what about our sexual energy? Is it transmuted? Very interesting idea as we talk about elderhood, right?
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's a huge topic. And well, yeah, sexuality. So we all go through changes in our sexual erotic lives, and can get out of control at times when we're young, especially. You know, the desires are very strong. And what I've experienced being 75 now is that the desire has dissipated considerably. Um, and my wife and I have found, uh, other ways that when I was younger, I would say, well, you have to be making love a lot. You have to have intercourse a lot. And what's happened for me as I age is it's not that important anymore. I was sort of helped into this realization by that I was diagnosed with prostate cancer 8 years ago. I'm still alive, thank God. So it was Gleason 9 out of Gleason 10. So Gleason 10 is the worst. You're going to die soon if you're a guy. So I had Gleason 9, and I ended up at um, Dana-Farber Hospital for 3 months um, under radiation, and pretty much destroyed my prostate. I still had sexual desire, but very much reduced. And so erotic fantasies, etc., were men and women started to look the same to me. We're just human beings. That's what happened to me. So I'm not recommending prostate cancer or Lupron, which is the drug that is called liquid castration that I had to take. I'm not recommending it to men, but there was we when we were in the waiting room with other men, sometimes we did joke, like, if we take the Lupron, are we still going to like football? Are we still going to watch football? Stuff like that. And actually, I heard a PBS program on this that actually sexual desire is very closely related to the predominance of certain hormones in the body. And that if you reduce, Lupron is a good example, that if you reduce testosterone, you really change men's behavior and understanding of erotic sexual life. And it did that for me. So yeah, I don't know. That's a huge question, but that's my
That's
my
your
take. Yeah, that's
Jonas
my
for
current take
dealing
on it.
with a challenging one. Um,
Yeah.
Another completely different direction here. The audience member says, I've been surprised by ageism, even though I knew it existed. How can we resist ageism together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I want to touch the meditative experience again. When I ground myself in silence and am aware of the feelings that are being kicked up as I go through the day, one of the feelings that I notice, or the inner observations, is that I care what other people think about me. In fact, I was so aware of what other people think about me and being self-conscious around other people. I could never talk like this in front of others until I was probably in my 40s, when I had to because of my job. But and I once led a retreat, no, actually several retreats. And let's say there are 20 people in the room, and I would ask people to just walk around and randomly stop in front of someone and say to the person, very kindly, say, I don't care what you think about me. I I really don't care what you think about me. And the other person would be silent and just listen. Okay, what does it feel like to say that? in not a negative way at all, but just not caring. And then the other person would say it to you. So maybe not caring is not the right phrase to use, but what it does is what it did for me is release me from what other people think. So now, as I age and I began to look differently and more, crevices are coming up, ravines in my face and stuff like that. I can be aware of someone looking at me saying, and imagine that they're saying that guy's really old, and not caring, just being happy. I really, I don't care. It's an incredible release. Of course, I have, other resources too, about in the spiritual dimension. In my experience from which I've gathered both from Buddhist meditation and a lot of Christian meditation and prayer, centering prayer, and so on, is the belief. It's a cognitive belief, a narration that ultimately I am beloved, and this connects with my grandmother holding me when I could have died. That I'm the beloved, and I've worked on this. One can't produce love or make other people love us, but one can have the experience that ultimately I'm a lovable person and a good person, no matter what other people say. So if other people are saying I'm incompetent, or I'm saying something stupid, or I'm too old, it just washes off. It just washes right off me. I don't take it seriously anymore, whatever others think.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question takes us back to meditation, and I'm even going to add on to it a little bit. The question is, are you aware of any meditation groups that are currently meeting in person in our area? I would also love it if you would just sort of maybe talk a little bit about how does somebody get started in meditation? Let's say I'm kind of interested to see if it would, what it might do for me, how it might change my life in some way. How would I get started? And then what kind of resources do you think are available? I guess in-person resources is what this person is asking about.
Right. Yeah. In person. So Google is a great resource on the computer. I mean, you can Google meditation in Northampton, for example. There's the East Hampton Vipassana Insight Meditation Group that's in East Hampton. Several of my friends either teach there or attend there. There are Zen groups. There are Tibetan meditation groups. And I think just doing some search on the computer is the best way to find them. You'll start seeing lists, and then what you do is you call and say, "I'm a beginner. Can you get me started?" I'm drawn to being more settled, being more still in the midst of all this crazy stuff that's going on around me, and can I join a beginners group? We have groups. I lead groups online now, even though I have a retreat center here. I can show you here. This retreat center is inactive on the physical level right now because since the pandemic, but I hope we can begin to meet in person soon. And if someone is interested, please, email me, and I might be able to get another group started. I have a Sunday morning group that are Christian contemplatives who are also interfaith oriented, and a Tuesday group that's just Village Hill people who have a psycho-spiritual practice of some sort, meditation, and then a Wednesday morning group that are people from all over Western. Well, actually, there's a woman from Peru, and a guy from Portugal. So that's a larger group on Wednesday mornings. I don't teach any particular method for beginners. A good basic method is insight meditation, which again is offered in East Hampton. Any hands showing for anyone who's done that form? Yeah, yeah, that's really. My mother-in-law was Sarah During. She died a couple of years ago, but she was a teacher at IMS in Barrie, and she led retreats with Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, and all those folks. They used to come to our house, and we'd have some Buddhist Christian excitement, which is always fun. So yeah, that's basic. And then Zen, Japanese Zen is also very, there are teachers around you who are just really trustworthy and good teachers. So yeah.
Do you have any beginning books, or if somebody wants to try to start on their own, is there anything that you would recommend?
Oh, one can start with books, but it's not the best way. The best way is to have a teacher, because there's so many. If we're sitting in silence, for example, one of the things you want to watch for is getting caught up in thinking. So I'm sitting for a half hour, I'm just thinking. And meditation is not about thinking. It's not about not thinking either. I've been on 3 retreats with the Dalai Lama, for example, and I play Japanese bamboo flute, which I have right here. And I played for the Dalai Lama's silent meditations. And the teaching in Tibetan Buddhism is very similar to what you have in the Catholic tradition, Roman Catholic tradition, called centering prayer. It's so simple, but one mistake that people make, for example, beginners, is the thinking, and it's not thinking, and then trying not to think. That's another mistake. I sort of describe the silence as allowing there to be space between the thoughts, allowing there to be space between the words. Sometimes the most interesting and beautiful and fruitful things happen between the words or between the thoughts. And that's kind of an intuitive thing. You can't actually, nail it with a narrative, but it is a feeling of freedom. So that when I'm talking now, when I'm talking to friends or Margaret, my wife, or whatever, I try to maintain an inner spaciousness so that I can be open to whatever's going to show up. And that is so basic to almost any meditative practice across all the traditions. So I can't recommend a book. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you. That's fine. Next question I'm going to say is a big topic. How about those of us who had abusive mothers?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it just went out of my view here. It's the question is, do we have to learn another way to love?
Wow. That's yeah.
Excuse me, not to mention abusive husbands, we have had to find other ways to love. That was the comment.
Yeah. Of course, that's a basic question. That is really important. Can I ever have access to the experience of a good mother if I've had an abusive mother? What would that pathway be like? I mean, I think my parents were alcoholic. They owned a bar from the time I was 8 to when I was 18. And they would come home at 2:00 in the morning when the bar closed, and they would shout and fight, and my father would hit my mother. So I witnessed domestic abuse, black eyes, broken teeth, cops coming to the door, feeling the shame of that as a kid. And it's not easy recovering from something like that. I was in cover with, I was arrested for breaking and entering when I was 12. I'm lucky to be here after all that. But I have to say that sometimes this is a weird thing to say, but sometimes that deep suffering can be the source of grace. That deep suffering can bring us to a depth of love that some folks who have had an easy life can never get to, or it's more difficult to get to. I think therapy is really important. I've had a lot of therapists over the years. I'm in therapy now. Um, I have to say it's with a Jewish therapist, and I, as a Christian with a Jewish therapist, I've really been enjoying that, and exploring again my childhood through a Jewish Christian Buddhist lens, because this therapist is open to that. So finding a good therapist is really important too, because there are therapists who have no, and maybe this is what some of us need, is therapists who have no interest in the transcendent or the spiritual dimension, and that's okay too. You just have to decide what and who you need to help. A good woman therapist for a person who has had an abusive mother can be a wonderful corrective, or a good spiritual director. There's a group here in Northampton area of women, mostly women teachers of Tibetan Buddhism, called Wonderwell is the name of the group. If you Google Wonderwell, their actual physical space is in New Hampshire, but the teachers come here frequently. And those I really trust those women teachers who teach the Tibetan tradition out of Wonderwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonas. Since we're at the top of the hour, Jonas has kindly agreed to take more questions, and I see we have at least one more question. So for those who would like to stay, please feel free to write into chat. Let me just take the time, though, to announce the next speaker for the speaker series, which is coming up on January 5th. Northampton Neighbors Speaker Series will be presenting Maria Rivera, who is the director of the Home for Fisher Hospice. And I think it's going to be a very interesting topic. It's entitled "The Way to Go," but its subtopic is demystifying hospice care at this point in time. And there are some things that have sort of come up that are kind of new. So please put on your calendars for January 5th. I think that'll be a wonderful topic presentation. Again, since Jonas has been willing, I see one question I'm going to answer just off the top is because somebody was asking about that Wonder group. It was Wonderwell, right?
Wonderwell, yeah.
Okay. Okay, you're getting some heavy questions here, Jonas. I hope you've got your
Well,
reading.
I get blamed from my family who think I'm too heavy. So
there you go. Anyway, okay, here's a question thought of, wondering if it's too broad, but can you share any thoughts you have regarding the Tibetan Book of the Dead guidance?
I read that book 30 years ago, and I don't remember anything about it specifically right now. It's not really, on a physical level about death or dying. It's a deep meditation on the experience of being mortal, and the basic teaching in Buddhism, which is impermanence, that everything is passing. In a few minutes, we're all going to be gone. This is already, it's already overing. Every moment is already overing. So we can have this, you can get dizzy with this perception that everything is passing. Tibetan Book of the Dead and other great books out of the Tibetan tradition really help a person to find something, to find a way to live on ground that is not passing, that allows one to be compassionate, to love, even in the midst of trauma, and to be creative. And I'm big on creativity. I think creativity is like allows us to be new, inventing new ways of speaking, new ways of listening, and especially as we age. uh, so, so I can't say specifically, but I'll bet what I just said would be okay with the author.
Thank you. Okay. What is your understanding or experience of life after death?
Ah, this may sound really odd, okay, but you asked. I'm experiencing life after death right now. I don't know if anybody's going to understand that, but I experience that I'm dying in each moment. I could die right now. Any of us could have a heart attack right now. That we're being mortal is really a risky experience. And life after death, what is that? I don't have a fantasy about being the same after death or anything like that. I don't know what Tibetans have some experiences of life after death. Christians have experiences. Some of my Jewish friends, you know, but I don't. I'm just not attracted to that question. I'm more attracted to the reality that death is just around the corner. So every moment is really precious. And the word precious shows up a lot when I think about death. It's all going to be over in a minute. Everything is passing. All the people that I love are going to die. I'm going to die. And get ready for it, because that's reality. So facing into death directly is more important to me than imagining what's after death. That's a diversion for me. I'm not, yeah, sorry, I'm just not interested.
Okay. One person is suggesting a couple of great books, for people to know about, and I'm sure you know them well, Jonas. One is A Path with Heart by Jack Kornfield, which I read many years ago, and it's true, that is a wonderful introduction to meditation, because Jack Kornfield is not only is he extremely knowledgeable about meditation, but he also has a delightful sense of humor,
Yeah,
and often talks about, the fact is that you have to uh, practice meditation on a very day-to-day basis. It's not all bliss and you
right.
know.
Yeah.
So, and then the other one is Sharon Salzberg is also a great writer, and I think you may have mentioned her. I'm not sure.
Yes, I did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know her. Yeah,
Oh,
I know both these folks, and back in the early '80s, I did a lot of meditation at the Insight Meditation Society, and again, my mother-in-law was a teacher there, so she and I and the family really had wonderful conversations over the years. But the Vipassana tradition is, I would say, in my experience of different varieties of Buddhism, Vipassana or insight meditation is the most pure, clean, um, unencumbered Buddhist meditation technique. You're just sitting and noticing whatever's passing through thoughts, sensations, feelings, memories, and so on and so forth. And I have to share an awakening experience I had on a 10-day retreat. So I'm sitting on a cushion with 100 people, and all day long is silence. Silence, that's all. You can't talk. You can't use telephone for 10 days. You can't send messages. Eating is silent. Everything is silent. And it was driving me crazy. It was driving me crazy. About day 3, I started fantasizing, like, how could I leave and not, without being ashamed? How could I sneak out? Because I can't stand just sitting there doing nothing. I was full of all kinds of feelings, and I didn't even know what they were. Um, and then something happened to me. I was looking around the room, and I noticed how judgmental I was. Like, why is she always wearing the same shirt and adjusting it in the same way? I'm looking at, people who are meditating in front of me in this room, and then this guy, every time he sits down, he has to do this. Why is he doing that? And I don't like how he looks either, you know? And I became so frustrated and angry at myself for being so judgmental. And then so I went into this depth of self-attack and felt, is this all I am? Is this all I am? My opinions and my judgments? And it felt like I was in the middle of a merry-go-round, and the horses are going around, and every horse is one of my opinions and one of my judgments, and one of my political opinions or my psychotherapeutic opinions or whatever. I thought, wow, this is really boring. Like, is this all I am? In the middle of this merry-go-round of repetition, and I started to cry, and the tears are dripping on on my shirt and on the cushion, and it was this incredible grief came up inside me, that was triggered by how shallow I am, and what an unlikable person I am. And I just cried this grief, like feeling so helpless, that and then as the tears dissipated, I just felt this incredible wave of love that was not produced by me, because I was just this lost, useless, repetitive, boring jerk. But this love came, and it came from nowhere. I didn't have to manufacture it or pretend I was a compassionate, loving person. And no, it wasn't that at all. Yeah, I just got hit by a meteorite from somewhere. So I think, meditation is not a cure-all in the way that some people think it is. You're not going to get bliss right away. Things will come up that you never expect, and it's an adventure. I don't go on long retreats anymore. To me, every moment is a meditation, especially in relationships like this, being with you all. I feel like I'm automatically accessing that inner spaciousness of being open and aware and accepting of whatever happens. I forget what your question was. I'm sorry. I'm aging. I can't remember.
Actually, well, we had talked about Sharon Salzberg and
Oh
insight
yeah.
meditation, and I think that's where you went from there. I would just like to throw in being a somewhat beginner meditationer, or a little child meditationer or whatever, because I certainly don't consider myself to be an expert, is that I would encourage people, if they're starting, is to be very forgiving of themselves and really be open to whatever it is they experience. I think one can. I have it's been true for me that you can be hard on yourself about meditation, right? Like you can be about anything, and that's kind of not the point.
Right. When am I going to get enlightened finally? Come on.
Right. How long is this going to take?
Right.
Well, let me see. One person wants to know if there are any openings in your Sunday morning group, meditation group.
Yeah, just email me, rbtjonas@aol.com. rbtjonas@aol.com. And yeah, we'll see. I try to go slow about new members. Some members have been there for 15 years, and we've become a really close community of about 15 people when everybody shows up. But I think I'm very open to having a conversation, whether it's a good fit. Yeah.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our questions. I want to say you've got a couple of people saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Much wisdom. They are very appreciative of your of hearing about your experiences and your knowledge. So I think you've got some good admirers out there.
Oh, that's always dangerous.
Oh no. Go right to the head, huh?
No,
Okay.
I've so enjoyed being with you, even though we didn't have time to hear from you directly, many of you, but I can just see in your faces the interest, and so I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think we'll close it off at that point. I wanted to show you one little more piece about Northampton Neighbors. And thank you, Jonas, so much for really sharing from the heart with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.